I'm John Little of OmegaShock.com, and this is the Weekend ShockCast for Saturday, June 7th, 2014. Today marks the 47th anniversary of the beginning of the last days. On June 7th, 1967, Motta Gur shouted the cry, heard round the world, haHar haBayit beyadenu. The Temple Mount is in our hands. From that moment on, a clock started ticking. A generation would not pass before the events described in Luke.21 would all be fulfilled. I talked about all that in my Prophecy Clock series, and this is an appropriate time for a bit of a review because this past week centered on America and ended with a dire warning. A warning that I wasn't really expecting to make. The importance of this day lies in the words of Jesus when his anxious disciples asked about the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in 70 AD, and the coming of the last days and his return. Christ goes on to give us a prophecy in one verse that spans 2,000 years. Quote, "And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Luke 21:24. That prophecy was fulfilled on this day, June 7th, 47 years ago in 1967, and as that day came to a close, the Jewish government of Israel controlled all of the city of Jerusalem, and the laws of Israel reigned supreme in every square inch of that ancient city. Luke 21:24 was no longer a moment for the future, but was now a historical fact. And for those who wish to claim otherwise, allow me to explain that Jewish Israeli policemen and Jewish Israeli law controls all parts of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. Having been a long-time resident of Jerusalem, I know whereof I speak. The Gentiles do not control any part of Jerusalem. But it is this verse that should concentrate our minds. Quote, "So likewise ye, when ye see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled." Luke 21:31-32. Jesus was saying that seeing the last days events come to pass meant that we were in that final time period that we call the last days. And he was saying that it was just a generation long. And 47 years have already passed us by. How much time do we have left? Not much at all. According to Moses in Psalm 90, the predetermined lifespan of a man is 70 years. If this is the span of time that Jesus is talking about in Luke 21:31-32, this means that we have 23 years or less to fit in all the prophecies of the last days. This must include the salvation of Israel, 7 years of cleanup after Gog and Magog, the rise of the Antichrist, yes, it takes time, and the Great Tribulation. Subtract all that from the 23 years that appear to be left, and this means that events must get started very, very soon. Very soon. And a very prominent cycles expert, Martin Armstrong, says that the cycles of war and civil war converge for the first time in centuries this year, and the cycle for financial collapse begins either this year or in late 2015. All of this means that in just a few short years our world will be devastated by a cataclysmic war and a solar flare larger than any that has ever been seen in the history of mankind, Ezekiel's fire. I spoke of nuclear war yesterday, and that is the most realistic scenario, and it's one that many devout brothers in Christ have seen in dreams and visions. It should not surprise us that such events are on their way. The fact that the future looks like it has been torn from the pages of the book of Revelation, well, it's a shock, but we knew that this was coming. Ask yourself what the Lord wants you to do. Do you know where God wants you to be as these events of the last days unfold? If you don't, it is time to get on your hands and knees and ask for direction, and then take it. If God does not give you clear direction, then I believe that you should get out of harm's way until God shows you what you are supposed to be doing. We have a job to do, and it is time for us to be about our Father's business. Are you going to be ready for this? So, what did we talk about this week? This week we talked about the abominations being done in our name and the threat ready to consume us. The U.S. government provides 90% of the world's heroin and is keeping its grip on Afghanistan for that purpose. That is bad enough, but America also produces 89% of all the pornography in the world, and now we find that the U.S. government has been actively promoting homosexuality around the world. And she backs all of that by going to war anywhere and everywhere in the world. Evidence points to a nuclear attack coming against America that will succeed, because she has backed Russia and China into a corner, and because it will be the vengeance of a holy and just God. So let's talk about that. On Monday, it was America, Lord of the heroin trade. Today, as I went through my personal email folder, I found something sent out by Chris Dwan of SilverShieldExchange.com. As I scrolled down the email, I found this: U.S. troops protecting opium in Afghanistan. We just observed Memorial Day last week, where we honored those who gave their lives so that we might be free. And my family has been represented in every American war fought since at least 1776. So it makes me sick to think of our precious boys and girls being sent out to become casualties so that the U.S. can keep its profits in the heroin trade. I really was going to talk about something else, so I'll have to wait until tomorrow for that, because I'm hopping mad over this. And yes, I do know that this isn't new. The United States government has become the single largest trafficker in narcotics since the 60s and 70s, and that thought makes me want to burn my passport. And it all began with the coup that took over the United States government on November 22, 1963, when Kennedy was assassinated. From that moment on, it was game over. Drugs began to flow into the U.S. from Southeast Asia on U.S. Air Force transports. We cultivated cocaine in Central and South America. And when Jimmy Carter signed a secret directive on July 3, 1979, giving covert aid to opponents of the pro-Soviet regime in Kabul, well, America became heroin traffickers. We taught the Afghanis how to make heroin from opium and exchanged it for guns. And now 90% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan. You'll never guess who transports the heroin out of Afghanistan. Really? The U.S. Air Force? Yes, really. No, 99.9% of the Air Force doesn't know that they're flying out heroin. They're just the unwitting drug mules for this vast operation that is netting the CIA billions and billions of dollars. And who is guarding the poppy fields? The U.S. Army. However, the U.S. Army is being pulled out of Afghanistan, but don't worry. The U.S. has brought in tens of thousands of private contractors to make sure that the the government of Afghanistan doesn't fall to those terrible Taliban, who also happen to have been created by the CIA. I provide a couple of videos to get your blood boiling. The first one is how opium greed is keeping U.S. troops in Afghanistan, brainwash update. And then there's a second one as a backdrop, Iran-Contra and the CIA cocaine conspiracy, another brainwash update. I was a child of the 60s and 70s, but while I was growing up, my country was falling, and it makes me sick at heart. We had such promise at our birth. There was goodness in us, but now I find it hard to see much that is good in the land of my birth, and I am devastated by this. Clan Little fled Scotland to America and elsewhere in the 1600s as the English, quote, pacified the border clans. And the first recorded John Little to arrive was in 1712. There was a John Little killed by the Hessians in the Revolutionary War. There have been little generals and little admirals. The Littles have been and are everywhere in the United States. We are truly an American family. So it makes me sick to see how our great country has become the drug lord of the whole world. Worse, far worse, we have invited God's righteous wrath against ourselves, and when God is angry with a nation, bad things happen to those who live in and around it. Please, get as far from ground zero as you can. Are you ready for this? On Tuesday, it was America, Lord of the pornography trade. I have a problem. As a writer, I tend to create lots of websites, and websites require servers, so when I have a writing project pop up, usually after reading something particularly upsetting, I sometimes have to go out and find a web host. None of that is a problem. This is the problem. I can't seem to find very many, hardly any, web hosting providers that do not allow pornography on their servers, and I refuse to compromise. I will not allow any of my websites to share so much as the air with a web server that has pornography on it. If a company allows pornography on their servers, they will not get my business, period. And that has made life quite difficult. When I left America as a painfully single young man of 26, the question on everybody's mind was, do you kiss on the first date? When I returned to the U.S. 14 years later, I was shocked to find that this was no longer the question, and I believe that Hollywood and pornography, but I repeat myself, are the chief cause. Worse, I have heard from many single Christian women that most of the supposedly Christian men they go on a first date with are expecting to spend the night afterwards. That makes me sick. Does it make you sick? Unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me, since 50% of pastors are consuming pornography on a regular basis. Yes, you heard me right. Every other pastor is a faithful consumer of pornography. Chances are your pastor is watching pornography. If God was willing to cast out Israel for such sinfulness, what do you think that he is going to do to us? Unfortunately, I'm not done. As I have tried to come to grips with this vile problem, I have learned that America is king when it comes to pornography. 89% of all the pornography in the world is produced in America. For more statistics on pornography, go to Current Porn Statistics from the roadtograce.net. This means that every second of every day of every year, the United States of America is corrupting the world with one of the most vile evils ever created. I don't know how to put it this any other way. Either America stops pornography, or God stops America. Unfortunately, I don't see America doing anything to even slow the growth of the pornography industry. And when you add this to what I said yesterday, this is the question that you should be asking yourself. When will God destroy America? I believe that the answer to that question is soon. Now take a look at the map of the pornography world. If you were to show that map around without the label and ask people what the green meant, they would probably say something like, those are the good guys. The maroon and yellow would be the bad guys, as in East versus West. But it's not. That map should make you sick, and I provide a copy of that map in the article. We are the bad guys. We are. All that green on that map comes from us, the U.S. of A. How dare we claim to be one nation under God? We blaspheme the name of God by claiming him to be our father. When Obama claimed that America was no longer a Christian nation, he said the truth, although he deserves no praise for saying it. Please, everyone, God is angry with the United States, and I believe that her cup of iniquity is overflowing. You do not want to be in or around the United States when God says enough is enough. Get away from ground zero before it's too late. Now, I started off talking about a problem, finding a web host that does not allow pornography on their servers, and I am pleased to announce that I have found some. For those of you who are interested, these web hosts do not allow any pornography on their computers. Hostmonster.com, Funio.com, Bitcable.com, LiquidWeb.com, ChristianWebHost.com, RocketVPS.com, KnownHost.com, SustainableHosting.com, StormHosts.com, Web1.ca, HitNet.com, WebHostingHub.com. As a side note, always do your own research before choosing a web host. Each web host has its own strengths and weaknesses, and you need to choose carefully. My own websites are on host monster servers, and I've had a few problems, but overall a good experience. For the rest, as well as host monster, caveat emptor. Are there other web hosting providers out there that do not allow pornography on their web servers? Share what you know with us. I'd be happy to add to the list or subtract. Please also share with us your experience with any of these providers. Good, bad, ugly. We'd all like to know, especially me. But let's get back to the wider issue of pornography. Everyone, please understand that pornography is literally going to kill us. If you are a consumer of pornography, God is angry with you. If He loves you, He will chasten you, and that chastening will increase until you stop or die. If God is not chastening you for your pornogaphy, it is a sign that you are not saved. It would truly be better for you to rip your eyes out than to keep watching pornography. Matthew 18:9. For those of us who do not consume pornography, well, we are still in danger. If you are in the U.S. when God judges America, you will suffer also. If your pastor is consuming pornography, you already suffer. If your church members consume porn, or your family members, you already suffer, whether you know it or not. Get on the warpath against pornography. God certainly is. Pornography is a deadly evil, and you must get as far from it as you can. And yes, leaving the United States would be a really, really good idea. Are you ready for this? On Wednesday, it was America, Lord of the Homosexual World. As I work my way through this America, Lord of the series, the next logical step is homosexuality. America has made gay rights the cornerstone of its foreign policy, and we have heard little from conservative politicians about this. The reason is that the American gay rights foreign policy agenda crosses party lines. And I am upset that my taxes have helped pay for the active and coercive promotion of homosexuality around the world. America has become the single biggest advocate of homosexuality that the world has ever known. In the entire history of mankind, no one has ever done more to increase homosexuality than America. No one. And we helped pay for it. Let me start off by making something extremely clear. Sin is sin. You could be as wonderful as Mother Teresa and you'd still go to hell without Christ. So none of this is an attack on homosexuals or any other group of sinful people outside of the church. We all hated and opposed God before we were saved, and focusing on the sinfulness of people outside of Christ is fairly hypocritical. These people cannot help being what they are. Also, let me make this rather controversial on purpose statement. Homosexual activity is probably no worse than adultery in God's eyes. I know that this might be shocking to you, and this thought is even shocking to me, but it's still probably true. Sin is sin, and the fact that it is unnatural doesn't necessarily make it worse, although it might. However, I stuck the word probably in there because homosexuality might actually be worse for society than adultery. But both are so bad that it's really hard to tell. They certainly seem to be promoted by Satan and his minions with equal force. Furthermore, any attraction that I might feel for another woman who is not my wife is probably as sinful as someone who feels an attraction to those of the same gender. I know. All of that is hard to stomach, but the Bible gives no stronger punishment for homosexuality, death, than for adultery, death. And I know of many Christians who suffer from same-sex attraction, and I am sympathetic to their struggle. Take my situation for an example. As someone who has been many places in the world, I can truthfully say that the women of Taiwan are the most beautiful on earth. And they are everywhere here in Taipei. So even though I am married to the most beautiful woman in the world, I identify with anyone engaged in the struggle to keep their mind pure, whatever that struggle may be. But, and this is very important, the punishment for both the sin of adultery and homosexual activity is the same in the eyes of God: death. This puts both right up there with murder. And America officially and actively promotes homosexual activity everywhere in the world. Yes, you heard that right. The American government officially and actively promotes homosexual activity everywhere in the world, and it did not start with the Obama administration. As I was doing my research for this article, I stumbled across an account of the Bush administration promoting gay lifestyles on billboards across Macedonia. Can you believe it? George Bush? George Bush's ambassador to Macedonia put up huge billboards all over the place, and each of them featured the seal of the American embassy in Skopje. And each and every one of those billboards actively encouraged Macedonians to engage in homosexual, bisexual, and group sexual activities. Did you get that? This was an example of George Bush telling everyone that they should have as much sex as they want, with as many people as they want, with any gender that they want, that it was fun and awesome. And they made sure that everyone understood that it was truly American. Please understand that people around the world associate America with prosperity, happiness, power, and the good life. And yes, I have seen this for myself. People want to be like America, even those who hate us. So when we throw up, literally, big billboards indicating that lots of gay and hetero sex with anyone is the American way, well, guess what people are going to do? That's right. They're going to have the urge to go out and have lots of gay and hetero sex because it's so very American and they want to be like America. It also goes beyond just advocacy. America applies pressure and coercion worldwide to promote the homosexual agenda. I provide a trailer to a much longer video on the subject. Titled Cultural Imperialism, see the full documentary at www.standforfamilyworldwide.org. I hope that video makes your blood boil. It certainly makes me so mad that I could scream. This is an abomination. How dare we force homosexuality on the world? How dare we? It is not enough for us to be vile and filthy ourselves, but we must make others to be as vile and filthy as we are. What a sick, evil, and twisted bunch of people. Worse, this sick and twisted agenda is promoted equally by both Democrats and Republicans. No matter who you elect, this agenda will go forward and increase. Let me ask you, of all the civilizations that have ever existed since mankind began, has there ever existed a civilization as morally depraved as America? Only one, and God destroyed it in the Great Flood. But in this sense, we are far worse. We claim to be one nation under God. And for us to make that claim, we invite vengeance upon ourselves because we blacken the name of God with every evil action we take. It is literally blasphemy, or blasphemio, to damage the reputation of God, and we have done that with gusto. Let me drive the point home with another map. Take a look at the map of the pornography world that I showed you yesterday. Now take a look at the map of the homosexual world. I provide both maps in the article. Look carefully at both of those maps. Did you notice that both of them are remarkably similar? In the same way as I wrote yesterday, if you took the label off of the homosexual map of that world and showed it to people, they would say that the green countries were the good guys and the gray and maroon would be the bad guys. And that would be completely untrue. We are the bad guys. America is master and mouthpiece of Satan's homosexual agenda in this world, and we Americans are associated with that satanic agenda. How does it feel to be so closely connected with Satan? It makes me feel like throwing up all over my keyboard before rushing off to burn my passport. You need to ask yourself whether America's cup of iniquity is overflowing yet. If it is, then you need to get away from the ground zero of God's wrath, because that is what comes when the cup of iniquity is full. Get out while you can. Get out now. Are you ready for this? On Thursday, it was America, Lord of War. I thought long and hard about where to go next in this series, America, Lord of the. We have already established the absolute moral bankruptcy of the United States, so there's very little territory to cover except, well, war. We have been in a shocking number of them, 120 since our founding, and that is not counting covert actions. In fact, there have been very few moments in time when the U.S. was not involved in war. That some of those wars were necessary cannot be denied, but the amount of time America has spent at war, well, it highlights the fact that America isn't the peaceful nation that we think it is. In fact, it really is a lord of war. War is both fascinating and horrifying at the same time. I have spent a lot of time studying the strategies and tactics needed to achieve victory in war, as well as the strength of human spirit that is the vital element in winning. But as I have dug into the reasons for war and the lies told to convince men and women to send their children off to war, I find myself horrified. Was it necessary for Germany to be defeated in World War I and World War II? Absolutely. But those wars were used to twist and bend us so that we would be what we are today, the Lord of War. American weapons and the CIA are involved in almost every conflict in the world today. It has gotten so bad that whenever you see a demonstration in some dark corner of the world, you immediately look for USAID or the National Endowment for Democracy, front groups for the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. State Department. We fed the conflict in Ukraine. We fed the revolt in Libya. We fed the civil war in Syria. We fed the Chechen conflict in southern Russia. We fed the uprising in Egypt. We continue to feed terrorist groups in Africa and Asia. We invaded Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses. We overthrew the government in Kyrgyzstan. And I have my suspicions about a host of other uprisings around the world that are just a tad bit too compatible with the foreign policy objectives of the psychopaths in Washington, D.C. In fact, the question is probably more accurately phrased this way. Is there any conflict that we aren't involved in? There isn't a single shred of morality in U.S. foreign policy. There isn't a single objective pursued by the U.S. that has anything to do with what we would consider just. All that the U.S. government cares about is money and power, and they will kill anyone to get it. Anyone. And no, there is no limit to the number of people that they are willing to kill. Please understand that to them there is no difference between 1 million dead or 1 billion. As Joseph Stalin famously said, quote, "One death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic." Close quote. Uncle Joe would have been completely at home in the U.S. Capitol because that is exactly how the CIA and the U.S. State Department feel. Exactly. Eisenhower warned us of the U.S. military-industrial complex, and we didn't listen. Now we reap the bitter fruit of that carelessness. How does it feel to be a citizen of the most warlike nation on earth? Unfortunately, America's enemies understand the U.S. government's willingness to kill millions and even billions to further their aims, and that has brought us closer and closer to the nuclear war that many have warned us about. Are you ready for this? On Friday, it was America, Lord of the End. The Littles have been patriots for more than 200 years, and the first John Little fell in battle on January 2nd, 1777, at the Second Battle of Trenton, just days after George Washington's crossing of the Delaware. And my dad's uncles fought in some of the toughest battles of World War II. But does a family history of patriotic service outweigh the truth? I wish that it did. America is no longer the country that my family fought for 228 years ago. In fact, it now represents all the evils that we stood against in that first war, and 2 centuries is not very long to have fallen so far. It is a strange feeling to stand at the end of time, to be among the last generation. Yes, I know that there is a 1,000-year millennium ahead of us, but the angel in Revelation 10:6 said that there would be time no longer. And that means the end of time. Furthermore, it should be clear to all of us that we are in that last generation that shall not pass away till all be fulfilled, as Jesus said in Luke 21. So yes, we do stand at the end of time, and we have all of history spread out before us. We can see how we got here, what God is doing, and what Satan is up to. And America sits as ruler of the world at the end of time. She is Lord of the end. Is she the beast kingdom? Not in her present incarnation. But the book of Revelation speaks of one of the heads that was given a deadly wound by military attack, i.e. by sword. That deadly wound is healed, as in Revelation 13, then the beast goes on to rule the earth. I believe that Revelation 17 offers us some insight into this when it says that the beast kingdom comes from one of the 7 heads and is the 8th head. Revelation 17:9-11. It appears that, when the head is rescued from certain death, the wounded head transforms into the 8th king or kingdom. It is that transformed head that becomes the beast. I'm afraid that this can only be America. Yes, I know that it is traditional for us to view the wounding of the 7th head as an assassination attempt upon a ruler who then is resurrected. But are you sure? Remember that the 7 heads are referred to as mountains. At the time when John receives his vision, it is said of the 7 heads that 5 are fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. Sorry, those cannot be people. Those are empires. America is the empire that was yet to come, that would only, to quote Revelation, continue a short while. 230 years is a very short time. Very short. If my interpretation is correct, then America will receive an overwhelming attack that will certainly lead to her death. Does this mean that America will be attacked with nuclear weapons? I don't see how this could be anything else. And many have had dreams and visions of just such an attack, and I treat these dreams and visions very, very seriously, and you should too. Worse, we have reports that American leaders are swaggering around the Capitol advocating the use of nuclear weapons against America's enemies. This means that the enemies of the U.S. must strike first, before America uses her nuclear weapons on them. I include a video about this entitled U.S. Has Plans for Preemptive Nuclear Attack, Paul Craig Roberts. Since America is actively pursuing a nuclear first strike, Russia and China have no choice but to strike first. No choice. It's either strike first or die. Please understand that the American empire is falling, and the U.S. will go down fighting. With all that the psychopaths in Washington have done recently, can there be any doubt that they will use nuclear weapons to preserve their power? There is no doubt in my mind, and there can be no doubt in the minds of the leadership of China and Russia. Unfortunately, I believe that God will ensure the success of America's enemies in their nuclear first strike. We have corrupted the world and blasphemed the name of God. We deserve what is coming. If you have any doubts, just read this week's series. America is the perfect vehicle for Satan's ambitions. But God is going to swat those ambitions on the nose. Although Satan will resurrect America, that will take time. Enough time for Gog and Magog to come and for God's prophesied salvation of Israel to be fulfilled. But this resurrected America will become the darkest and most vile evil that the world has ever seen. As bad as America is now, the evil that she will become, well, it will shatter all the records. Are you ready for this? This has been the Weekend ShockCast for Saturday, June 7th, 2014. I'm John Little of OmegaShock.com. Have a good weekend.